you're cycling, when you're cycling, the whole world of it smiles with you.
Just to make things festive.
You're smiling, when you're smiling, with you. Oh, yes.
I started cycling about 1953, again because I was a speed skater. In those days, the only cyclists I saw in Central Park or in New York in general were expatriates, primarily from France, Germany, some from Belgium, and these were the people that were my mentors. Essentially, these guys must have been in their 50s, and I was, hardly 13, 14 years old, and they would ride almost 50 miles a day in Central Park, and I couldn't keep up with them most of the time, and I would try and go to the front, and they'd say, "No, kid, go to the back."
New York Magazine.
New York Magazine. And the article was New Jock City, and it was about all of these athletics that are happening in our urban city. And it was quite sort of the
Took over the front cover, New Jock City.
and the idea of the article is here we are in this incredibly urban setting. Isn't it fascinating, all of these sporting and athletic activities that are here and all the people that participate? The New York Roadrunners Club, for instance, racquetball and tennis and bicycling. And because I was president at the time, they interviewed me for this. And then we talked about the different rides that we do. And you know how it is when we talk about the rides that we do, 40-mile rides, 60-mile rides, 80-mile rides, we go away for 3 days on our bike. People look at us like we're like, and this guy said to me, "Wow, do you guys have is there any social activity? It sounds like you're all just hardcore cyclists. Do you get to make any friends or meet?" I said, "Well, of course." I said, "In fact, I met my fiancée there, and we're going to be married this fall." And that got into the New Yorker magazine, which made the New York Cycle Club the hottest single spot.
I remember Paul Hoffer said, "Irv, for you, gearing is sex, isn't it?"
I want people to keep their clothes on.
I love the social aspect of the club.
I guess most of it is the camaraderie.
It's just been a wonderful, wonderful experience, and it's something that I will never, ever forget, particularly some of the things and the people I've met, wonderful people.
Anyway, and I tell people the New York Cycle Club is a very interesting microcosm of society. There's 2,000 members. No one has anything in common other than riding a bicycle, and you get to meet and become friends with folks that you'd never really ordinarily come in contact with through normal activities.
And that's what it's about. It's about receiving a lot of joy and about giving it back. It's a volunteer club. It's really a labor of love, and the people around me. I'm just totally blown away by people's generosity and love of cycling.
Whether your life is to clean up horse manure in Central Park, or you're a high-powered corporate executive, this common bond and this friendship that we have created throughout the years in the New York Cycle Club has been the absolute richest component of it.
But there's something about the quality of people that you spend with on Saturdays and Sundays that you ride with. It's just and you're trying to get from point A to point B. You're seeing these wonderful roads. There's a wonderful bond. And like Christy said, we would just not know some of these people that we know. We would not have had occasion to meet them.
I came across a group of people I noticed at the Central Park Boathouse, and they were a group of what I would call normal-looking people. They were not particularly athletic-looking, very diverse-looking group of people, men and women, some of them definitely not athletic-looking. So I felt comfortable enough to go up and ask them who they were and where they were going.
And they were all sort of dressed up in I wondered where they were going, and they were going up to Nyack.
To the club, my very first ride was this place I had never heard of before, never been to before, Nyack, New York.
So I ended up doing one of the first famous Nyack rides, which were very fun and very, very fast and very competitive in those days.
Yeah, I was so amazed at this beautiful cycling region along the Hudson River and along the reservoirs and geese.
And there was something called an all-class ride to Tallman State Park, which I'd never even heard of before. So I went on the ride, and there was a woman named Jody Saylor who was leading the ride. She was very friendly. It was the first time I'd ever ridden with a group of people, more than 3 or 4 or 5 people, and there must have been 50 people, riding up 9W, crossing the George Washington Bridge. It was an incredible, exhilarating experience. On the way back in those days, all the different groups, the A's, B's, and C's, all rode together back to the city. So there must have been 200 cyclists in a row, and I just thought it was the most amazing thing.
Now, I never even knew that you could get out of the city on your bicycle across a bridge. And they said, would you like to come? And I said, well, I'm not a member. He said, you don't have to be a member. Come along. And I said, well, how far are you going? And I thought he said 15 miles. And we started taking off, and we're going across the bridge, and I'm already getting a little winded because I hadn't been actively cycling for many years. And I turned to the person next to me and said, wow, this seems like a lot more than 15 miles. And he looked at me and said, not 15 miles, it's 50 miles. And at that time I said, 50 miles? And it turned into an event where people were very kind. They waited for me at the top of every freaking hill. Needless to say, I was whipped. But they were so nice that I kind of wanted to find out more about the club. And I went down to the meeting one night, and I walked in, and there was this Roly character who was certainly not athletic looking and not intimidating, very friendly man called George Kaplan, who was at that time president of the club.
I was a Sea Rides coordinator, I think for 2 years, and I was planning to run the next year to be the VP of Rides. And it was early one Saturday morning in May or June. I was up at the boathouse, and I was having coffee with the ladies who raced. They had just raced with CRCA, and one of them blurted out to me, she said, you're going to be the next president of the club. I said, what? I want to run for VP of Rides. She said, no, you're going to be the next president. We've decided.
When I joined the club, Dan Henry was the president. He seemed like he was the president forever. Quite an unusual man. He was very tall, slender. He was an airlines pilot. I think he was a pilot in the Second World War. And I met him just at the time when the airlines were transitioning from prop planes to jets. And one day he called me up and said, well, Michael, you want to go for a ride? Here it was in the middle of the week. Aren't you working? I said, no, I was put on psychiatric leave. This is just an incredible story. It seems he was going to have a long layover in California, and he was wheeling his bicycle while wearing his uniform, his captain's uniform, through the terminal. And he was told that adults do not ride bicycles, and that's why he was put on leave.
6 of us showed up at this ride, and the ride leader turned out to be Lee Galopter, who was a member of the New York Cycle Club then. And he told me about the cycle club. The ride turned out to be to Belmont Lake State Park on Long Island. So it was my first club ride in my first century.
There were maybe 100 or 200 members way back then.
One of the things that I liked about the club in its early days, we had it was a close-knit family.
Chris Mailing, president, Irv Weissman, former president.
And Irv was an artist at learning how to make a challenging ride easier for people, because Irv, he wanted people of all levels of fitness to enjoy cycling. He really did feel that cycling was for everyone. And
he did a tremendous amount for this club. I know when we would do rides to, let's say, Nyack, with the traditional A-type A rides was you'd head straight down Palisades Avenue, all the way down, make a left turn on Angle and go straight up to Nyack, or down to 505 and straight up to Nyack. Irv was the first person that showed me all these little left and right turns through the I guess Englewood Cliffs, you know, rides like Walnut and Churchill, and Irv kind of was the first person to do that, and it made a lot of sense. You know, this turned out to be a lot more fun.
Lee Galopter, who started the Berkshire Weekend. Debbie Bell, for a while, was leading a weekend. Labor Day, we used to go out to Shelter Island. Christy, who started the SIGs because of his now wife Jody, because of her knee problem.
Michael Nelson might have been, perhaps Chris Mailing was, who continues to be a friend today, 30 years later.
I remember Chris Mailing leading skill rides to Nyack and practicing skills in the town of Nyack. So I would say he probably was my first mentor.
There have been a lot of great characters in the club. Christy Gazetta is one that comes to mind. We rode many rides together, and he was a great rider and is a great rider. And many funny stories. You know, things that happened with people trying to pass each other, and people trying to stay ahead, and people trying to catch each other, and you know, all the dynamics involved with riding socially and yet competitively at the same time.
If you're riding with Christy Gazetta, Christy, how far is lunch? Couple of miles. 10 miles later, Christy, when is lunch? Oh, couple of miles. All the time, all the time. You're riding with Christy, you know you had to have pocket food with you.